Family should be your safest harbor. But what happens when those sharing your blood become ruthless traitors? I thought my biggest stress was managing million-dollar corporate tech projects until one fateful afternoon. I walked into my own home, witnessing a betrayal so cruel, it forced me to build a flawless, inescapable trap. If you have ever been stabbed in the back by those you trust most, take a seat. The lethal game is just beginning. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now let's begin the story. My name is Haley Garza. I am 32 years old and I serve as the lead engineer for Etherion Dynamics, one of the most ruthless technology conglomerates on this side of the country. I had just driven back to my home in Austin, Texas, after a grueling 7-day business trip. The Texas heat was suffocating, pressing down on my shoulders as I dragged my suitcase up the driveway. All I wanted was to drop my bags, take a long shower, and hug my 12-year-old daughter, Maya. I had promised her we would order pizza and watch movies until midnight to make up for my absence. I unlocked the heavy oak front door, expecting the comforting, familiar quiet of my sanctuary. Instead, the first sound that hit my ears was a raw, agonizing sob. It was Maya. The sound tore through the quiet air, a high-pitched wail of pure heartbreak that froze the blood in my veins. My motherly instincts flared instantly, overriding every ounce of exhaustion I felt. I dropped my leather briefcase onto the hardwood floor and sprinted down the hallway toward the living room, my mind racing through terrifying scenarios. Was she hurt? Had someone broken in? The reality was far worse than any random home invasion. I slid to a halt just before the entryway of the living room, my breath catching in my throat. My beautiful, meticulously organized home looked as though a tornado had ripped through it. Books were swept off the shelves, their spines cracked and pages scattered like dead leaves. The velvet couch cushions had been hurled across the room, and the expensive Persian rug was bunched up, revealing the scratched hardwood beneath. But it was the people causing the destruction that made my heart stop. There, tearing through my personal sanctuary like ravenous scavengers, were my own flesh and blood. My biological mother, Patricia, was frantically ripping open the drawers of my antique mahogany console, tossing my personal documents over her shoulder. My older sister, Chloe, was on her hands and knees, violently yanking the floor grates off the air conditioning vents. And looming over it all was Derek, Chloe's fiancé, wielding a heavy steel crowbar and actively prying the baseboards away from the drywall. They moved with a feverish, desperate energy. They were not acting like family checking on my house. They were acting like common thieves. My eyes frantically scanned the chaos until I found Maya. She was huddled in the far corner of the room, her knees pulled to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. She was not physically harmed. There were no bruises on her arms, no blood. But her devastation was absolute. Spread out across the floor, just inches from Derek's heavy work boots, were the crushed, shattered remains of her science architecture model. It was a complex miniature eco-city made of delicate balsa wood, tiny solar panels, and intricate wiring. Maya had spent 3 grueling months building it for the state science fair. I had watched her burn the midnight oil, carefully gluing every tiny window, her little face scrunched up in deep concentration. Now it was nothing more than splintered wood and twisted wire. Derek had clearly stomped right through it, without a second thought, crushing 3 months of my daughter's passion into dust just to get to the bookshelf behind it. "It has to be here," Derek barked, his voice dripping with frustration as he kicked a piece of Maya's broken model out of his way. "She would not leave it at the Etherion lab. It is too valuable." "Keep looking," my mother hissed, her hands tearing through a pile of mail. "Haley is supposed to be in San Francisco for another 24 hours. We have time. Find that fireproof safe box." "Derek is right," Chloe added, her breathing heavy as she stood up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Those quantum chip prototypes are worth millions on the open market. If we get our hands on them before she files the official patent on Monday, we are set for life. Just find the damn box." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. They were not here for money. They were here to steal my life's work, the proprietary quantum technology I had spent 4 years developing. They knew I kept the physical prototypes in a highly secured safe box at home during the final testing phase. They were willing to destroy my house, traumatize my 12-year-old daughter, and sell me out to corporate espionage, all for their own greed. A normal person might have screamed. A normal daughter might have stepped into the room crying, demanding to know why her own mother and sister would betray her so deeply. But I am an engineer. My entire career is built on analyzing catastrophic system failures, isolating the corrupted components, and neutralizing them. The shock evaporated, replaced by an icy, absolute calm. The love I held for these 3 people simply shut off like a power switch being flipped in a dark room. I did not shed a single tear. I did not make a sound. Instead, I slowly took a step back into the deep shadows of the hallway. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my smartphone, and switched it to complete silence. The ambient glow of the screen illuminated my face in the dark as I watched them tear my life apart. They thought they were the hunters closing in on a prize. They had no idea they had just walked straight into a cage, and I was about to lock the door. I leaned back against the cool plaster of the hallway wall, completely hidden in the deep shadows of the entryway. My thumb moved with practiced surgical precision across the glass display of my smartphone. I bypassed the standard civilian alarm interface, ignoring the basic security application that anyone could hack. Instead, I opened a heavily encrypted custom-built application I had coded myself during my late nights at the Etherian Labs. With 3 rapid taps, I woke up the hidden surveillance network integrated seamlessly into the architecture of my house. Tiny pinhole lenses embedded in the smoke detectors. The smart climate thermostat and the recessed lighting fixtures blinked silently to life. I toggled the master override switch, initiating high-definition 4K video and enhanced audio recording across all 16 monitoring zones. I routed the data stream directly to an off-site impenetrable server, ensuring that whatever happened next was preserved perfectly as undeniable legal evidence. The screen of my phone populated with a grid of live feeds, turning my chaotic home into a matrix of observable data points. The audio channeled directly into my wireless earpiece, rendering every rustle and whisper crystal clear. I watched Channel 4, which covered the far side of the living room. My sister Chloe was no longer just looking for my prototype. She had paused by my media console and was actively shopping in my house. I watched as she shamelessly shoved my $2,000 virtual reality headset, a brand new digital tablet, and a pair of expensive noise-canceling headphones into her oversized designer leather tote bag. "Finders keepers, little sister," she muttered under her breath, a greedy smirk twisting her lips as she zipped the bag half shut. I switched the primary view to Channel 7, my private home office. Derek was in there now, completely off the leash. He was on his hands and knees, driving the heavy steel crowbar into the pristine seams of my custom oak floorboards. The sickening crack of splintering wood echoed loudly through my earpiece as he violently ripped up a 3-foot section of flooring. He was sweating profusely, desperately hunting for a hidden floor safe that did not even exist. He was destroying thousands of dollars in custom carpentry on a wild guess. Let them dig, I thought, my heart beating at a slow, steady rhythm. My immediate priority was isolating the variables. I needed to remove the only precious thing in this house that actually mattered. I backed away down the corridor, placing my feet precisely on the edges of the floorboards to avoid making a single creak. I slipped out through the side utility door and stepped into the muggy, heavy evening air of my backyard. Crouching low behind the tall hydrangea bushes, I opened my secure messaging application and texted my daughter. "Maya, it is Mom. I am outside by the garden. Do not make a sound. Do not stand up. Crawl to the sliding glass door in the kitchen and come out to the patio right now." I held my breath, watching the live security feed from the kitchen and living room intersection. On the screen, I saw Maya look down at her glowing smartwatch. She wiped her tear-streaked face and glanced fearfully at Patricia, who was too busy tearing apart the dining room buffet cabinet to notice her granddaughter. Moving with the silent, desperate agility of a terrified child, Maya dropped to her stomach. She commando crawled behind the massive marble kitchen island, completely out of their sightline. A grueling 60 seconds later, the heavy glass door clicked softly on its track, and she tumbled out into the evening heat and straight into my arms. I pressed my hand gently over her mouth to keep her from crying out, hugged her tight, and guided her swiftly through the gaps in the privacy fence to the house of my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. I handed Maya over, giving the retired nurse strict instructions to lock every deadbolt and absolutely not open her doors for anyone under any circumstances. With Maya completely safe and out of the equation, the final tether holding back my vengeance snapped cleanly in two. I was no longer a panicked mother protecting her child. I was an engineer sealing the perimeter of a contaminated site. I walked back into my house through the utility door, moving with the cold mechanical purpose of an executioner. I stepped quietly up to the massive oak front door. My mother had carelessly left it unlocked for a quick getaway. I reached out and slowly, silently turned the heavy brass deadbolt. The quiet metallic click locked them inside. There was no escape now. I took a deep breath, letting the icy resolve harden my spine, and stepped out from the hallway directly into the very center of the living room. They were so utterly absorbed in their frenzied pillaging, they did not even register my presence. Chloe was adjusting her stolen loot. Derek was walking in from the office, breathing heavily, the crowbar swinging loosely in his grip. Patricia was standing by the ruined fireplace. I reached out to the main wall control panel and smashed my open palm against the master illumination switch. Instantly, all 32 high-intensity LED floodlights in the recessed ceiling fixtures ignited at maximum capacity. A blinding surgical white glare flooded the entire room, entirely vaporizing every shadow in a fraction of a second. The sudden explosive burst of light hit them like a physical wall of force. Chloe shrieked in terror, dropping her heavy tote bag to the floor with a loud crash. Patricia threw both her hands over her eyes, stumbling backward and crashing into the solid oak coffee table. Derek froze mid-step, his jaw dropping open, the steel crowbar slipping dangerously in his sweaty grip. The chaotic noise of their search died instantly. They were completely paralyzed, caught exactly like vermin in a snare, blinking blindly into the harsh light of their own ruin. The harsh illumination caught them perfectly mid-crime. For 5 agonizing seconds, the only sound in the living room was the hum of the central air conditioning. Patricia recovered first. The shock on her face melted into a practiced, sickening mask of maternal concern. She brushed drywall dust off her designer blouse and took a hesitant step forward, clasping her hands together. "Haley, sweetheart, you are home early," she gasped, her voice trembling with forced, syrupy innocence. "Thank goodness you are here. We came over to do a deep clean while you were in San Francisco. The house was a complete disaster when we arrived. We were just trying to tidy up, and well, things got a little out of hand with the repairs." I did not blink. I did not move a single muscle. I just stared at the heavy steel crowbar in Derek's hand and the stolen electronic devices spilling out of my sister's open tote bag. The sheer audacity of the lie was almost fascinating to observe. Derek saw the absolute lack of belief in my cold stare and decided to drop the pathetic charade entirely. He stepped heavily in front of Patricia, pointing the steel tip of the crowbar directly at my chest. His face was flushed red with frantic anger, his jaw tight, his eyes wild with desperation. "Cut the crap, Patricia," Derek spat, glaring at me. "She knows exactly why we are here. And you know what, Haley, you owe us. I am in the hole for $500,000 to some very bad people in Vegas. They are threatening to break my legs by Friday. You are sitting on quantum technology worth 10 times that amount. Hand over the blueprints and the prototypes right now. It is your family responsibility to step up and save us." "Family responsibility," I repeated. The 2 words felt like bitter ash in my mouth. Chloe finally found her voice, clutching the leather strap of her bag, as if she was the victim. You have always been so selfish, Haley. You make a fortune at Ethereum Dynamics while we struggle to pay rent. Just give Derek the tech. You are a genius. You can easily build another one in a few months. I looked at the three of them. My mother, a pathological liar. My sister, a petty thief. Her fiancé, a violent, desperate gambler. I felt no sorrow. I felt no desire to scream, to demand an apology, or to ask how they could betray me so deeply. Arguing with parasites is a massive waste of metabolic energy. I simply analyzed them like a failed mechanical experiment that needed to be discarded. You have exactly 30 seconds, I said. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, cutting through the humid air like a scalpel. Derek scoffed, taking a highly aggressive step forward, gripping the weapon tighter. Or what? You are going to fight me. Do not be stupid. Just give me the safe box from your office. Or what? I replied evenly. The armed tactical unit from the Austin Police Department will be walking through that front door. When I turned on these lights, I also triggered the silent panic protocol integrated into my smart home security grid. The dispatcher was notified 1 minute and 20 seconds ago. The average response time for a priority home invasion in this district is under 4 minutes. You have roughly 30 seconds to vacate my property before you are all face down on the concrete with assault rifles pointed at your heads. The remaining color instantly drained from Patricia's face. Derek's aggressive posture completely crumbled into sheer animalistic panic. He dropped the crowbar. It clattered loudly against the ruined hardwood floor, a sharp metallic ring that signaled his surrender. "Run!" Chloe shrieked, abandoning her heavy bag of stolen electronics and sprinting frantically toward the entryway. Patricia scrambled after her, pushing carelessly past the broken furniture. Derek hesitated for a fraction of a second, his greedy eyes darting toward the hallway leading to my office. He lunged backward, disappearing into the room for a fleeting moment before sprinting back out. Cradled heavily against his chest was the gray, heavy-duty, fireproof steel box he had finally managed to pry from its hidden compartment under my desk. They crashed into the front door, fumbling wildly with the brass deadbolt I had locked from the inside. Derek cursed loudly, his sweaty hands slipping on the metal before the lock finally gave way. The heavy oak door flew open, and all three of them stumbled out into the dark Texas night, sprinting toward their parked car, like terrified rats fleeing a sinking ship. I stood perfectly still in the center of my devastated living room, listening to the aggressive screech of their tires echoing down the quiet suburban street. They thought they had won. They thought they had just secured a $500,000 ticket out of debt. I watched their red taillights fade into the darkness, and a slow, sharp smirk crept across my face. Derek had bled and sweated to dig out that steel box. He was willing to destroy my family to get it. But he had absolutely no idea that the heavy container clutched in his greedy hands was completely devoid of quantum technology. He had just stolen a meticulously engineered death trap, and the countdown to their absolute destruction had already begun. I walked across the dark lawn to the house of my neighbor. Maya was trembling in the guest bedroom, clutching a blanket, but she was entirely safe. I brought her back home, keeping her eyes strictly averted from the worst of the wreckage in the living room. I tucked her into my own bed, rubbed her back until her breathing leveled out into a deep sleep, and promised her that the monsters were gone for good. Once she was completely out, I walked straight to the kitchen island and opened my encrypted laptop. It was pushing 11 at night, but Marcus always answered his phone. He is a ruthless corporate defense attorney who specializes in white-collar crime and intellectual property theft. I uploaded the massive high-definition video files from my hidden servers directly to his secure legal portal. I watched his face on my screen as he reviewed the footage of my own family tearing up my floorboards. "Haley," Marcus said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble through the speakers. "This is a massive slam dunk. We have breaking and entering, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. I can have the tactical police units kick their doors down in 20 minutes. No, I replied, staring blankly at the ruined marble countertop. We are not calling the cops. Not yet. Marcus frowned, leaning closer to his webcam. They stole a fireproof safe from your home office. You told me earlier today that you were bringing the final Ethereum quantum prototypes home to prepare the patent filing. If those chips hit the black market, you will face federal charges for severe negligence. We cannot wait. I allowed a slow, cold smile to touch my lips. Marcus, I am the lead engineer of a multi-billion-dollar technology conglomerate. Do you really think I would store the most advanced piece of quantum hardware on the planet in a basic steel floor safe bought from a local hardware store? The actual prototypes are sitting securely in a biometric vault at the subterranean lab of my company. I paused, letting the reality wash over him. The box Derek stole is a complete decoy. I planted it there 2 months ago when I realized Chloe was snooping around my home office during our Thanksgiving dinner. What is inside it? Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing with intense professional curiosity. 3 heavy solid-state hard drives, I explained, leaning back in my chair. They are physically wired with military-grade micro-global positioning system trackers embedded directly into the circuit boards. Furthermore, the drives are formatted to look exactly like highly encrypted corporate data vaults. But they do not contain a single line of quantum research. The moment Derek or his buyers plug those drives into any computer to try and crack the encryption, they will execute a custom-coded, extremely aggressive Trojan malware. It will instantly hijack their network, bypass their firewalls, and mirror every single keystroke audio file and camera feed directly back to my private server. It also maps out the entire network topology of anyone they communicate with. Marcus let out a low whistle, a genuine sound of profound respect. You weaponized your own safe. Breaking and entering is a minor felony. I continued, my voice devoid of all mercy. Patricia and Chloe would play the victim cry in front of a sympathetic judge and get probation. Derek might do 2 years. That is entirely unacceptable. They tried to destroy my life and traumatize my daughter. I want to rip out the roots. We are going to let them try to sell the decoy drives. When they do, we catch them committing federal treason and wire fraud, and we dismantle the entire illegal gambling syndicate Derek works with in the process. Marcus nodded slowly, a predatory grin forming. They need to believe they hold the golden key. If they suspect it is a trap, they will dump the box in a river. Leave that to me, I said, terminating the secure call. To trap a greedy rat, you have to offer it a mountain of cheese. I opened my personal email application and drafted a message to Chloe. I deliberately abandoned my usual precise professional tone. I wrote with atrocious grammar, erratic capitalization, and the frantic pacing of a thoroughly broken woman. Chloe, please, I typed rapidly. You do not understand what Derek took. If Ethereum finds out the prototypes are missing, I am going to federal prison. They will take Maya away from me. Please, I am begging you on my hands and knees. Do not open the box. Do not show it to anyone. I will liquidate my retirement accounts tomorrow morning. I will give Derek the $500,000 he owes in Vegas. Just bring the box back to me tonight. I am terrified. It was a masterpiece of pathetic desperation. I hit send. Then I opened my secondary monitor and booted up the tracking software linked to the decoy drives. The waiting game began. I did not have to wait long. Less than 2 hours later, right around 1 in the morning, a bright red blip illuminated the dark map on my screen. The global positioning system had activated. They had cracked the physical steel box open in a cheap motel room on the dark outskirts of town. 10 minutes after that, my console flooded with a massive stream of incoming data. They had plugged the drive into a laptop. My Trojan malware effortlessly bypassed their cheap civilian antivirus software and established a secure backdoor right into their system. I was now reading their screens in real time. They had completely ignored my desperate offer of $500,000. Greed had blinded them entirely. Why settle for saving the life of Derek when they thought they held the keys to a corporate kingdom? I watched the keystrokes appear rapidly on my monitor as Derek desperately navigated the dark web. He was communicating with a notorious black market technology smuggler, a broker known for moving stolen corporate secrets to overseas buyers. "We have the Ethereum quantum blueprints," Derek typed out his digital words, cementing his own federal indictment. "We want $10 million. Cash transfer only. We need to move this tonight." I sat back in the quiet dark of my kitchen, taking a slow sip of cold water. They had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. The game was mine. The malware I embedded in the decoy drives was an absolute masterpiece of invisible digital destruction. I sat alone in my darkened kitchen, the soft blue glow of my multiple monitors reflecting off the marble countertops. Over the next 48 hours, my private server became a massive repository for their most incriminating secrets. The Trojan virus acted like an aggressive parasite, bypassing their cheap security software and burying itself deep into the root directories of their stolen laptop. I heard every single frantic phone call. I read every desperate text message. I tracked their exact global positioning coordinates down to a 3-foot radius. I watched the red dot on my map bounce erratically between 3 different rundown motels on the outskirts of the city, showing exactly how terrified they were of being caught by the men Derek owed money to. However, their greedy momentum violently slammed into a solid brick wall. The black market technology broker they had finally managed to contact demanded absolute proof of the quantum blueprints before transferring a single dollar. Derek plugged the solid-state drives into his computer again, desperately trying to access the files. But he was immediately blocked by a simulated military-grade encryption protocol I had coded myself. The screen simply displayed a locked prompt. The files required a unique, highly complex 16-character alphanumeric password. Blind panic quickly set in. The violent debt collectors in Vegas were closing in on Derek, promising to break his legs by the end of the week. Trapped and desperate, the scavengers turned their fangs back toward me. My personal cell phone began ringing relentlessly. I ignored the calls, letting them go straight to my voicemail deliberately, allowing their frustration to boil over into legally actionable extortion. Patricia left the first message. Her voice echoed through my computer speakers, completely stripped of any maternal warmth, replaced by pure toxic venom. "Haley, listen to me very carefully," my mother hissed through the audio file. "Derek hit a security wall. We know you have the override password. You are going to give it to us right now. If you refuse, I am calling the executive board of Ethereum Dynamics tomorrow morning. I will tell them you smuggled the quantum prototypes out of the laboratory to sell them to foreign competitors. I will go to the press. I will entirely destroy your reputation and your career. Do not test me." Chloe followed up 10 minutes later, her tone dripping with malicious glee. "You have until midnight, little sister. Give us the code, or you lose everything you have ever worked for. Maya will have a disgraced unemployed felon for a mother." I listened to their vicious threats with a cold, clinical detachment. They thought they were backing me into a corner, but in reality they were simply handing me the final heavy nails for their own coffins. I waited exactly 4 agonizing hours, letting them sweat in their cheap motel room, before I finally called Derek back. I forced my breathing to become shallow and ragged. I injected fake trembling tears into my voice, playing the role of a thoroughly broken woman. "Please," I sobbed loudly over the cellular connection. "Please do not call the executive board. If I give you the password, you have to promise to disappear. You have to take the money and leave me and Maya alone forever. I cannot go to prison." Derek laughed, a cruel, deeply victorious sound that made my skin crawl. "I knew you would finally break. You bring your laptop and the password to the location my buyer sets up. Tomorrow night. If you try anything stupid, or if you bring the police, your life is completely over." The trap was now fully primed. But before I walked into the jaws of a supposed criminal syndicate, I had to completely eliminate my only vulnerability. I could not afford a single weak point. I called Marcus, my attorney. Within 3 hours, a heavy black armored sport utility vehicle pulled quietly into my driveway. 2 highly trained former military private security contractors stepped out. I quickly packed a suitcase for Maya, kissed her forehead, and loaded her into the back seat. They drove her exactly 250 miles away to a secure, off-the-grid corporate safe house in Houston. Until the dust settled, my daughter would be guarded around the clock by professionals armed with automatic weapons. With my child completely removed from the blast radius, the heavy invisible armor of a protective mother fell away, leaving only the cold, calculating wrath of a lead engineer. The meeting location was a massive, rusted, corrugated steel warehouse, situated deep in an abandoned industrial district on the eastern edge of the city. The oppressive Texas humidity had settled inside the metal building, making the air thick and incredibly hard to breathe. The silence of the empty industrial park was heavy, broken only by the distant, mournful horn of a freight train. I parked my car, grasped the handle of a sleek silver aluminum briefcase, and walked toward the heavy, rolling side door. The briefcase was entirely empty. It was nothing more than a psychological prop designed to complete my vulnerable disguise. I stepped through the door into the cavernous, echoing interior. A single string of harsh, buzzing halogen work lights illuminated a cheap folding table in the exact center of the cracked concrete floor. Standing around it, practically vibrating with greedy anticipation, were my mother, my sister, and Derek. Standing across the table from them was a massive, intimidating man in a dark, tailored suit, flanked by two imposing bodyguards. This was supposedly the ruthless black market boss they had contacted online. As I walked slowly into the harsh circle of light, clutching the empty briefcase to my chest like a shield, the smugness radiating from my family was absolutely suffocating. Chloe crossed her arms, a sickening, arrogant smirk plastered across her face. "Look who finally decided to cooperate," Chloe sneered, looking me up and down with intense disgust. "You look terrible, Haley. I told you that you could never win against us." Patricia stepped forward, her chin raised in absolute arrogant triumph. She looked at me not as her child, but as a conquered, pathetic enemy. "You brought this on yourself, Haley. You were always much too arrogant for your own good. Now step up to the table, give Derek the access code, and maybe we will let you keep your precious little job." I stood completely alone in the dim, filthy warehouse, surrounded by the people who shared my blood, listening to them gloat over my fabricated ruin. I looked at their grinning, victorious faces, biting the inside of my cheek to hold back a cold smile. They were standing directly on the trapdoor, completely blinded by their own greed, and they were actively begging me to pull the lever. I stopped exactly 2 feet from the edge of the cheap folding table. The heavy metallic smell of rust and old machinery filled the stifling warehouse air, clinging to my skin. Derek practically vibrated with impatience, his eyes darting frantically between the massive man in the tailored suit and the silver aluminum briefcase I held against my chest. The stolen laptop sat open on the table, the screen glaring with that red encrypted locked prompt that stood between them and their imaginary millions. "Hand over the password. Haley." Derek commanded, his voice cracking slightly with the desperate energy of a cornered rat. "Do not make this harder than it has to be. The money is waiting for us right now." I did not look at my mother or my sister. I kept my gaze locked entirely on the glowing screen. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out a small folded piece of thick white paper. I tossed it onto the table. It landed right next to the keyboard with a soft tap. Derek snatched the paper like a starving dog finding a fresh scrap of meat. His sweaty fingers fumbled as he unfolded it, his breathing turning ragged. He leaned aggressively over the keyboard, rapidly typing the 16-character alphanumeric sequence I had written down. The heavy silence in the cavernous warehouse was only broken by the loud, frantic clicking of the plastic keys. The black market boss watched him with a completely unreadable, stony expression, his large hands resting calmly on the surface of the table. Derek hit the enter key with a triumphant, heavy strike. He took a deep breath, stepping back to watch the decryption process begin, a greedy smile already stretching across his face as he dreamed of paying off his violent debts. He expected to see a green loading bar, He expected to see the highly classified proprietary quantum engineering schematics of Ethereum Dynamics flood the screen. Instead, the screen instantly flashed a blinding, violent crimson red. A deafening mechanical siren blared directly from the laptop speakers, echoing sharply off the corrugated steel walls of the warehouse. Simultaneously, a series of massive echoing slams physically shook the building. The heavy rolling steel doors of the warehouse automatically slammed shut and locked down with heavy magnetic seals triggered directly by the system override code Derek had just willingly entered into the malware. A booming pre-recorded voice blasted over the speakers, completely drowning out the siren. Warning: Federal Bureau of Investigation. The perimeter is fully secured. Drop all weapons and place your hands flat on the table. The triumphant smirk vanished from the face of my sister, instantly completely wiped away and replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. Patricia gasped sharply, clutching her chest, as she stumbled backward away from the table, her eyes wide with horrified confusion. "What did you do?" Derek screamed, his voice hitting a hysterical pitch. He lunged across the table toward the man in the tailored suit. "What kind of trick is this?" The imposing black market boss did not flinch, nor did he reach for a weapon. He simply reached inside the breast pocket of his jacket. He withdrew a heavy leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming gold federal badge. He slammed it down hard onto the folding table. "Special Agent Miller, Cybercrimes Division," the man announced, his voice devoid of any warmth or mercy. "You are all under arrest for extortion, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit the theft of federal trade secrets." Before Derek could even process the terrifying reality of those words, the high glass windows of the warehouse shattered inward, raining glass down onto the concrete. Blinding tactical strobe lights pierced the darkness from every direction, disorienting the room. The side doors burst open and dozens of heavily armed tactical police officers swarmed into the space like a tidal wave of black armor. Bright red laser sights painted the chests of my mother, my sister, and Derek. Shouting voices commanded them to get on the ground immediately. Derek tried to bolt toward the back exit, but two massive tactical officers tackled him hard onto the unforgiving concrete floor. The sickening crunch of his nose breaking against the floor echoed in the space, followed immediately by the sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs ratcheting tightly around his wrists. Chloe dropped to her knees, sobbing hysterically, throwing her hands in the air and screaming loudly that she had absolutely nothing to do with this. Patricia was shoved roughly against a steel support beam, her expensive designer blouse covered in industrial dust. Her hands bound tightly behind her back by an unforgiving officer. The trap Marcus and I had meticulously orchestrated was completely flawless. We had handed the federal authorities an airtight case wrapped perfectly in a bow, with the perpetrators caught literally red-handed, trying to sell classified corporate technology to an undercover federal agent. I stood perfectly still in the chaotic center of the raid, untouched and entirely calm. Patricia caught sight of me through the crowd of moving tactical officers. Her face was streaked with running black makeup and tears of profound, sudden regret. "Haley!" She shrieked, her voice cracking with desperate agony, fighting against the grip of the officer holding her. "Haley, please. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. We are your family. You cannot let them do this to your own mother." I looked down at her. I searched my heart for a fraction of a second, but I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sorrow, no lingering affection. I stepped calmly past her, thrashing body, walked directly up to the folding table, and picked up my gray heavy-duty steel fireproof box. I secured it under my arm, turned my back on the three of them, and walked slowly toward the exit. I did not utter a single word to them. They did not deserve another syllable of my breath for the rest of my life. The justice system showed them absolutely no mercy. Because the supposed technology they tried to steal was classified under strict federal economic security laws, the judge threw the absolute heaviest sentence at them. Derek was sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. He will be an old, broken man before he ever breathes free air again. Chloe and Patricia barely avoided prison time by pleading guilty to lesser charges of possession of stolen property. But their lives were completely destroyed anyway. The ruthless corporate attorneys at Etherian Dynamics filed a